welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to teach you guys how to calculate the percentage that you're supposed to use to resize your inserts. So there's a question that gets asked around a lot of, I have this size insert and I want to scale it up to this size, and what's that percentage? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't fit right. So I wanted to explain why that is and show you mathematically how to do that calculation, because it's very, very simple. So first off, to give you some background on paper sizes if you're not familiar, here I have the A series, a few of the A series, which is your A5, this one's your A6, and this is your A7 or pocket. And when you look at the shape of these sizes of paper, they are very similar in shape. They're smaller, each of them is smaller, but the shape is similar. And you'll see that they're not quite squares, but they're more square than, for example, than your personal size or even your B series papers. Okay, and it's important to note that these sizes are similar, and the naming convention kind of dictates and lets you know that as well. A5, A6, and A7. And here I have a personal wide sheet insert, and this is a personal size. So the reason why this is important is because when you do scaling, you want the shapes that you're scaling the inserts from to be similar. That will create the best scaling effect versus if you were wanting to scale, for example, A5 to personal, which is a lot skinnier. It's not going to work out as well, and I'll show you mathematically why that is. So let me try to explain this the best I can. My husband says I'm the worst at explaining anything, so we'll see how it goes. So let's do a simple example of, say you want an A5 insert, but you only have an A6 insert. So how are you going to scale your insert from A6 to A5? So it's really simple, and I've just written it out here mathematically for you. What you want to do is you want to take what do you want, the paper size that you want, divide it by the paper size that you have, multiplied by 100. So first, you take the length. So the length of my A5 paper is 8.3 inches. So 8.3 inches. The length of my A6 paper is 5.8 inches. And you multiply that by 100, and that gets you 143%. Now, we also want to calculate the width as well, and I'll explain why this is important, especially later on when you're doing insert resizing of different shapes. So you take the width again of what you want, which is your A5, so that's 5.8 inches, divided by what you have, which is your A6 of 4.1 times 100, and you get 142%. And you'll see that the two percentages are very similar, and that's good because that means you can use your 142 or 143, it doesn't really matter since it's so similar. And when you resize it, it's going to fit well from your A6 to what you have on your A5. When you size it, when I say it's going to fit well, I mean that there's not going to be too much white space lengthwise, and there won't be much white space widthwise, because the shapes are similar and the resizing percentages are very similar. It's going to fit well between the two sizes. Now, if you wanted to resize, for example, your A6 to personal, or let's use A5. Say you want to resize your A5 to personal. Let's do that calculation. So this is your personal, and we'll just do this calculation here. So your personal, and I forgot to write it here, but I'm showing you here, is that your personal, the length of your personal paper is 6.75 inches. And the length of your A5 is 8.3. The width of your personal paper is 3.75, and the width of your A5 paper, again, is 5.8. So when you do these two calculations, your length is 81% and your width is 64%. And you'll see that the difference between these two is very big, right? Whereas when you had done your calculation from A5 and A6, they were very similar. And that's because the size was similar. But because you're taking something that's more square and you're trying to convert it to something that's more rectangular, obviously the percentages won't be the same. And when you have different percentages, you have to use the smaller of the two. And the reason being, if you were to use the length of 81% and you applied that to your A5, when you scale it at 81%, the length will fit well, except your width, it's going to be too wide for your personal size paper because the personal size is smaller. And the width is only supposed to be a scale of 64%, right? So you have to use a smaller one if you want it to fit on the page. When you use the 64% scaling for the width, the issue you're going to have with that is that the width will fit, but because it's so long and skinny, the personal size, when you scale it down 64%, you're going to have a lot of white space lengthwise, but at least it'll fit onto a personal size. So I hope that makes sense. That's the general gist of it. And you can take a screenshot of this resizing because you can do this, fill it in for any insert sizes that you're trying to resize for. But that's the general gist of how to do the calculation. Now, another question that you might have is, do you want to use a smaller insert and scale it upwards and scale it bigger, or do you want a bigger insert and size it down? So I think there's a couple considerations. If you were to use a smaller insert and you were to scale it bigger, the one thing that you might have is a resolution issue. So if the resolution is not as good on the smaller size insert, then when you scale it up, it might be a little bit murky. Typically that should not be an issue, but it could be, say there's a lot of designs or whatever it is, it could be an issue. The other thing is, depending on the grid size, maybe your grid size will be too big or the line spacing will be too big when you size upwards. Now, when you're taking a bigger insert and you scale smaller, again, you can have the opposite problem of your grid or lines being too small. But the resolution then shouldn't be an issue because you're taking something that's bigger and scaling it smaller. So those are just a few things to consider when you're deciding which way to scale. But most importantly is having the pages that are the similar shapes. So another example I just want to show you is when you're looking at, for example, personal wide, your A5 to personal size is not a good fit because of the width and length difference, right? But if you were to use personal wide, let's say, which is the same length as personal but wider than the personal size, when you're scaling personal wide to A5 or A5 to personal wide, that will be a much better fit than scaling to personal because the shapes are more similar. So I hope that makes sense. Again, it's quite a simple calculation, and if you know the calculation, you can do that for any insert size. You just find the length and width dimensions of any of your inserts, any of the inserts that you want to scale, and you can figure out the percentage yourself. So that can save a lot of money, if you have different planner sizes and you're using the same inserts, or us planner girls, we love to switch up our planners all the time. So instead of having to buy the new size each time, if you can rescale the inserts that you already have, that's a much more cost-effective way to go. So I'll just keep this for you. Again, it's what you want, the size that you want, divided by the size that you have, multiplied by 100. And it's important that you calculate both the length and the width and you use the smaller of the two, especially when you are resizing inserts that are different shapes, because there will be a big differential in the percentage for length and width. Okay, now I hope that made sense. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below and I will be happy to answer them for you. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please consider subscribing to my channel and giving this video a like, since it really supports and helps my channel out. Thanks guys, bye.